Hello, BookTube. All right, we're continuing on with 7.7K. We're having a problem in this batch of answers today because of I'm being extra Stevie. I'm being extra Steve-like. That's causing problems. So lots and lots of rants, lots and lots of digressions. We're going to try and tighten that up for this batch. So we have next John Gagarinakis, who says, number one, you have mentioned your disdain for a number of political commentators like Dave Rubin, Tim Pool, Charlie Kirk, hucksters, all three of them. Tim Pool may be the worst. Actually calls himself a liberal. But they're all pretty bad. The only one who has a future, I think, in United States politics is Charlie Kirk. Are there any online commentators whose work you admire? Well, yes. I mentioned in the last batch, I mentioned David Pakman. I don't admire David Pakman, but I do find him watchable. He has a little bit of too cool for school hipster reserve, and acts a lot like a 90-year-old, which drives me nuts. And also, he infuriated me in 2016, him and his producer, Lewis, by saying in every episode, yeah, it's Hillary Clinton's to lose. Yeah, she's got this, locked down. Pakman spent all of 2015 saying Donald Trump will not be the nominee. He spent all of 2016 saying Donald Trump will not possibly win. There's no way that he could. Episode after episode after episode. And even nowadays, he doesn't say that anymore about a Biden or victory, but he does still have annoying habits about him. He has the affectation of a very old man, which I don't know where that comes from. I don't know why that is. Where he'll wrap up every episode by saying, "And you can follow us on Instagram." It's sounding exactly like a 90-year-old who has just learned the term. But I also like Beau of the Fifth Column. He is also a political commentary channel. Very, very good. And Jesse Dollemore, who I've been watching just this year. He does the Dollemore Daily. Those are his daily political videos. I've been watching him just this year. And I've watched as he just progressively gets more and more outraged by the things that he's seeing in the Trump world. But I watched those and a bunch of others, but mainly those. And number two, have you ever read War and Peace? John Gagarinakis wants to know if I have ever read War and Peace. I have, yes. Jordan Parsons says, are you Thomas Pynchon? No, no, I am not Thomas Pynchon. Paula Hammerly says, are you in downtown Boston? Many background noises like a friend who lives on Beacon Street. She said tourists have still flocked to Boston. Have you noticed that? Tourists are still flocking, but in much lower numbers. There is noise here, construction noise, but it's only because a batch of condos are going up directly across the street. Theoretically, in 6 months, that noise will all stop because that work will be over, and there's no other work to be done over there. So, let's see here. Zoe Wolfchild says, "Would you consider yourself a helicopter parent?" No. Deb and I abandon all of our children. We don't go back and hover over them. We don't want anything to do with them. Unless you count dogs. If you count dogs, I'm still not a helicopter parent. Because dogs have quite a bit, most of them have quite a bit of independence. And I prize that in them, so I don't get in the way of that. Deborah McDonald says, what is your opinion of Dorothy Dunnett's King Hereafter? Very good book. It's a long book for me, so is it worth my time? Yes. Dorothy Dunnett is worth your time just in general. William Fett says, what are your opinions on the following sci-fi writers? Ben Bova, I like him. Robert Heinlein, I like him. Kim Stanley Robinson, I think he's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Also, your thoughts on sci-fi movies of the 1950s, and is there one that stands out? I don't think there's one that stands out. Although from the 1970s, sci-fi fans, young sci-fi fans that I've met, could stand to watch Silent Running with Bruce Dern. They really could. It's a very, very good movie. Royale Tube says, your thoughts on Philip Reeve, Mortal Engines, Fever Crom, Railhead? Not sure I know this author. Maybe I do. No thoughts coming to mind. Paula Hemmerly says, did you say once, if you don't watch all the videos, you are hurting the presenter? If can't watch all, should I unsubscribe? Okay, I don't know what any of that means. I have never said that if you don't watch all of someone's backlist of videos, you're hurting them. And also the line, should you unsubscribe if you haven't watched all of my videos, sounds like a game. It sounds like trying to make trouble. It sounds like trying to say, no, trying to get me to say, no, don't unsubscribe. I don't particularly like games like that if that's what it is, but I'm not sure I understand the question at all. It stems from something that I don't think. So not sure where it comes from. Hannah's book says, I am considering reading John Dos Passos. Where should I start? Or, given that I'm a relatively slow reader with many unread classics on my shelves, should I put his work lower on my list? It depends on what those unread classics are. Right? It depends on what those unread classics are. Even if we narrow it to American literature, it depends on what those unread classics are. I don't know anymore what people have and haven't read. But for instance, I would say that you should definitely read and know the great American classics of the 19th century before you move on to the 20th century. So, for instance, if you haven't read Moby Dick, if you haven't read House of the Seven Gables or The Scarlet Letter, if you haven't read Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, maybe even, or Walt Whitman, if you haven't read these things and know them, then I would say don't move on to John Dos Passos until you do. But let's say you're interested in only the 20th century. Okay, well, 20th century has bigger figures than John Dos Passos. I wouldn't say that it has any better figures, but it does have bigger ones. So, I don't know. It depends on what is still on the unread pile. I would hate to say, yeah, go ahead and read USA, which is a major undertaking, or maybe you could start with Manhattan Transfer. If, for instance, you haven't read, I don't know. we should discuss it. Logan Mortensen says, number one, should Biden and Trump debate on Joe Rogan's podcast, and why not? They shouldn't. Of course they shouldn't. The man's an imbecile. I don't want him being a national tastemaker. And number two, I often collect books for my personal library faster than I read them. Do you have any tips for more efficiently managing such a backlog? Well, buy more bookcases and be careful. Be mindful always of books that you are merely accumulating, but that you're not enthused about. Whether you've read them or not, you should be enthused about them. But there's absolutely nothing wrong in buying and acquiring books faster than you read them. There's nothing wrong, in other words, with building a personal library. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just periodically you should go through, like, for instance, an example that was just on my mind. I was just up in Vermont visiting Mark Richardson and his family up at their new house. They moved house. And there's nothing like moving house to make you have a come to Jesus moment about your books. And Mark saw 2 whole shelves of hardcover Clive Cussler novels. He's a big fan of Clive Cussler and can talk very intelligently about the guy's writing. But he looked at those hardcovers and thought, these were in a bookcase that I didn't really look at. I haven't really looked at it. I doubt I'll ever go back to them. So I shouldn't keep them. That is what you want to watch for. You want to watch for books like that are just dead parts of your library, and cut them out. But you shouldn't ever feel guilty about having more books than you've read. Just keep an eye on them, that's all. Guilty Feet says, let's see here. So many questions, take your pick. Well, let's do them all. What are your thoughts on Israeli authors David Grossman and the late Amos Oz? I love them both. Have you read Ellen Gilchrist, and do you wish more people have? I have read Ellen Gilchrist, and I don't like her at all. I don't dislike her. She seems to me one of those, late 20th century authors who are just writing to write. I've never sensed any fire in her works, and that always leaves me nonplussed. Let's see here. Is James Ellroy a genius or an angry lunatic? He's both. I'd love to hear you talk more about your younger writers who have already put together a significant body of work rather than a single well-received book. Jhumpa Lahiri, very good writer. Zadie Smith, a very good writer. Jasmine Ward, a very good writer. Joshua Ferris, a fantastic writer. They all have missteps, but you're doing fine so far. David Mitchell, brilliant. Tessa Moshfegh, you had a misstep there. Although even in a Tessa Moshfegh's case, I can see that her rhetorical ability is there. So it's possible that if she gets hit on the head or maybe becomes homeless, she could write a great book. Right now, her books are ruined not by a lack of ability, but by her evident bedrock belief that anything she writes is worth reading. And that's not true, and any author who feels that way really needs to have it strained out of them, and it just hasn't strained out of her yet. Who else do you suggest here? Colson Whitehead, a great author. Are there any future Updikes or Toni Morrisons among them? Well, who knows? I hope there are no Updikes among them, but you've named a roster of really good people here, people you can be relied upon to write something that'll be interesting enough to read. Isaiah Armstrong says, what do you think about the controversy around the movie Cuties? I mentioned a whole raft of alt-right YouTubers like Jeremy at the Quartering, who closes one eye and bobs up and down like that when he's talking and can barely read his own script. They went crazy over Cuties, just insane over it. The movie apparently condemns the sexualizing of children, but others say it sexually exploits girls in the process. Do you think this movie could be considered erotica? Well, I actually watched the thing. I went and watched it. I was tired of hearing partisan takes one way or another, so I went and watched it, and it's indefensible. It's if it could be considered erotica, the people who consider it erotica should be in jail. It's indefensible. The idea that the young director is putting forward only now because she's afraid for her career, that this is a commentary on sexual exploitation of children rather than sexual exploitation of children itself, is nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. The young girls in the movie are intentionally portrayed as hypersexualized sociopaths, specifically because the director wanted to start a controversy. I just think she was a little caught off guard by the sheer size of the controversy that she started, costing Netflix $1 billion. That's a lot. That's a lot of controversy. Let's see here. Scorchdor Schwartigsticken? Oh, God. Number one, what is the difference in your reading speed in different languages? You read 150 pages an hour in English, but how about in many other languages you can read? It varies. It's actually a very good question. It goes. The only way that it goes up is Latin. All the others, I would imagine it goes down a little. Number two, you can read for 10 hours a day in English, but if you were only to read in other languages, would the amount of time you can read without stopping change? Would you get tired or need a break faster? No. Or did you never need any break from reading and can go forever in any language until you die of dehydration? I can go for a long time in any language. Number three, I found an old edition of a huge and forgotten book about the history of English literature. It's a 1,000-page brick called The History of English Literature from Earliest Times to 1916 by Arthur Compton Rickett. Oh my. Oh my. Know the book. Is it any good? Do you recommend it? With surveys of literature like that, it's all going to boil down to how eloquent the writer is, because the surveys change. And I've read this book. It is pretty good, pretty interesting, pretty eloquent. Number four, what do you think of people on AuthorTube who are giving writing advice but only reading contemporary woke literary fiction and have no knowledge of the canon? I watch some big channels where there are people with tens of thousands of subscribers giving writing advice who not only have never in their lives read Homer, but have no interest in reading the canon. How can someone give good writing advice if they have never read Homer or Shakespeare? It's possible to give good practical writing advice about self-discipline, about the right attitudes, about generating pages every day, about that sort of thing. And it's certainly possible to give practical writing advice about finding an agent, navigating the field of publishing and whatnot. But it is not possible to be a good writer if you scorn literature. So, if you want your writing advice to come from someone with lots of practical expertise and you don't care about the rest of it, plenty of those people are still worth listening to. If you are one of the people who says, well, I'm not going to take advice from a teacher on any subject unless the teacher is good at the subject, then you should avoid such people, because they, by definition, cannot be good at the subject. And number five, now the most important question of all, the one the entire internet is dying to know. Dude, how much can you lift in the bench press? Not much anymore. I'm afraid I'm a little old. Once upon a time, I held my own, but not anymore. And Carolyn Morgan's the last one. All right, so we're finally going to finish this. Boy, it's 5 videos. No matter what, it's 5 videos. Carolyn Morgan says, let's see, I have 2-ish questions. Number one, what are your thoughts on Graham Greene? I am completely unfamiliar with him and was always curious as why there are so many of his works in Penguin Classic Deluxe editions. Any thoughts on why so many for him in particular in that line? I largely like Greene. I don't love him. I don't idolize him. And I think the answer to why he is so fully represented at Penguin is not only because of his relationship with the Viking publishing house, but also because a lot of the people at the editorial board in Penguin in days gone by did love him and did consider him a formative experience. And so they wanted to enshrine him. But he's not worth your time. Number 2, I am assuming you've read your favorite book, Ovid's Metamorphoses, many times over, and I'm wondering if, after many new readings, you still perhaps find yourself uncovering anything new with each reread. Or put a different way, does it affect you differently with each reread? And it does. Yes, I not only find new things, even in English translations. If I go back to somebody's translation, I will suddenly notice something they're doing that I didn't notice before. But reading Ovid just without a translation, oh my, yes. I find new stuff all the time. And it's never old for me. It's never rote. Well, there you go. That was 7.7a of the Q&A. Fantastic. That was so much fun. I swear, you people come up with such incredible questions. I want to end this the way I started it yesterday by thanking you from the bottom of my heart, not only for all these great questions, but for this company, for your company. 7.7K, that's unbelievable. So I'm going to wrap this up for now. We will convene again very shortly to do 7.8K. So we'll start getting your questions ready now. Thank you, BookTube.